stole your cookies. No, I mean your copy.
I know it. I know that's okay.
Good morning. We are now at 11 o'clock and we have our regular public meeting at 11 o'clock scheduled. However, the Public Services Department has doesn't have anything for us today. The next item on our agenda is something called the Lexington Bus Service. As you may know, I represent Cowlitz County on the Cowlitz Transit Authority, which was created back in the 80s to provide public transit. The city of Longview had taken over a single bus privately owned service that was not able to make matters meet. And anyway, there is a state law that allows a special district to be formed, and that did occur. The voters have voted twice on a sales tax to fund the local share of transit services. So the city of Kelso has 2 representatives, and the city of Longview have 2 representatives, and then the county has 1 representative. And it roughly reflects where the people live that are inside this particular district. About a week ago, I received an inquiry from a resident in Lexington wanting to know how he could get bus service. He's blind, an adult, and lives in Lexington, and blind due to illness. So I said I would look into it and see what the process was, because Lexington is not in the public transit benefit district. And what I found was a confusing law that had 2 different ways that could initiate a change to the boundaries if that was wanted. One is initiated by a signature petition, a formal annexation process that would have to be voted on by the people in that district. The other way is to hold a public transportation conference, which consists of elected officials from the constituent parts of the district. And they can determine that it's in the public's interest to expand the boundaries. And, and they can just do that. In both of those situations, the county plays an important role, because we can stop it. We have veto, in essence, we have veto power over extension. Annexations that affect cities, those city councils have the same kind of veto power. We've never had an expansion in the time that we've had the PTBA. So I looked into it for this gentleman. I let staff know that the inquiry had come in, and they are trying to work with him. They already run a bus to Lexington. As you might recall, the state is providing a pilot grant to fund the bus out to Lexington. And I think you may have a map that shows the route. And I think it's important for us just to be aware of the potential of adding Lexington, just because of the massive construction of homes going out there, multiple family homes. And in fact, if you look at item 3 that's labeled on the map of that route, it's labeled Solomon Road. If you're at all familiar with the geography, Solomon Road separates the Lexington community sort of from Beacon Hill, and it's right at the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah.
For years, there has been a low-income apartment complex called Country Run that has probably 45 or 50 apartments there. But between Country Run and Ocean Beach Highway, for years, there was just an empty lot. There are now 300 apartments built. And, that it is huge. If you drive up there, it's dramatic for people, and you drive it every day. You've been watching that.
Yeah.
In addition, you'll notice that number 4, which is labeled Timwa Estates, that is a huge manufactured home residential area. And as people age, their access to public transportation can become critical to avoid having to move. And so it actually goes and turns around in that mobile home park, and it also winds around through the Ponderosa neighborhood. But south of Ponderosa, you'll see a big blank area. Well, that also is a huge subdivision that we all approved about a year ago, North Lexington, and it's 80 homes and about 60 additional apartments. And then the other thing, if you look off to the sides of these 2 inset maps for Lexington, you'll see the grayish, greenish colored area. That's Riverside Park. And you'll recall that we sold a strip of land for an apartment complex to go between Riverside Park and West Side Highway. So that's another apartment complex they've actually broke ground. They're starting to work on that.
Is that by the fire?
Right by the fire station, yeah. So again, all those kinds of developments are happening. Right now, the people in Lexington historically have not been interested in the bus run because there weren't that many multiple family units, and single family homes really, it's the need's not nearly as great there. The other thing that's interesting is that there has been a growth of commercial properties in Lexington, and sales tax revenue is an important part of the revenue stream for Dallas County, as well as the bus system. And they currently do not pay for the bus service. So it would be, I would think it would be logical that we, if the interest is there, then that's the key thing. If the interest is there, they ought to annex through election and, adopt those taxes and pay. While the commercial area in Lexington has grown recently in a pretty healthy rate, hardware store and restaurants, most of the grocery shopping, I'm sure, is still being done in the big cities, and they're paying for the bus service. So there's another argument that they're already paying, and they ought to have access to it. It may be an issue that comes up. Hopefully we can handle it. What the guy needs is paratransit, and if he lives within 3/4 of a mile of this fixed route, he's eligible for the curbside service from the paratransit. So that's what staff is working out with him. We want to make sure he gets the service.
So when you say staff, which staff are you?
River City Transit staff.
Okay. And I have some other questions at the right time.
But yes.
Okay, just clarify, when you say annex, that's annex as the entire city, Lexington into the city, or just the transportation?
So the folks who want to promote it define the boundaries, but the one stipulation is it has to have contiguous connection to the district. And in this case, it's the city limits, or both Longview or Kelso. If you count the Lexington Bridge, it's North Kelso, or Longview, it's going to be the hill on which the Pioneer Cemetery is located. It's called Linwood Drive is one of the addresses.
Okay.
And that's in the city limits, and that's the closest one. So, and it's by precinct. So if it's voting, it's going to be by precinct. So it's going to be those precincts that would connect the district.
But just to be sure, if that gets annexed, they go on to Kelso or Longview Police Department, not the sheriff.
No, they're not annexing to a city. That'd still be unincorporated. So they'll still be Cowlitz County
Okay,
residents.
that's what I
okay.
wanted to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a city annexation. It's
Okay.
an annexation into the bus district.
And then I haven't looked it up right now, but I recall the letter, and it was a sidewalk issue. He had trouble walking because he is legally blind. He's got to use a cane, and the sidewalks are very useful for that. But when there's no sidewalk, or a sidewalk, no sidewalk, sidewalk, no sidewalk, it's a problem. And I thought that's what he was asking about.
No, well, I think that might have
might
been
be
a
a
different
different
person.
letter?
Because no, I got an email, yeah. At any rate, that may end up being an issue that we may have to deal with totally different. It's going to be something Mike Moss's department will have to deal with. I know based on my experience with the city and all the trees and the roots that broke sidewalks,
Oh, yeah,
that was a big issue. And it turned out that broken chunks of concrete are a hazard, and they're on city rights of way, and the city was responsible unless you had a program of improvement. If you don't have a program, you've got the liability. If you're implementing improvements, piecemeal, you can't do it all at once, but
yeah.
that's the way you get around that liability. And we may be approaching that point with Lexington. It depends on the age of the sidewalks and all those things. Traditionally, residential areas not very many of the residential areas have sidewalks. So that's, if you don't have any sidewalks, you can't
Yeah,
hold us accountable
it's
for the
having
difficulty.
sidewalks and then discontinuing the stretch and so forth. You mentioned age is an issue. That is to say, when people get old enough, they don't drive, they take the bus. Do we have the data on that? Because the ridership now, I thought, except for the special paratransit or something like that, are just totally skewed toward young people. Just my impression. I don't have the data, but I think it's
Okay.
worthwhile finding that out.
It's hard we get the data on the people who use it. So that's the tough part. My impression is much different. It's people that are called transit dependent, the elderly, disabled folks,
Yeah.
and particularly and low income folks. So the routes are really actually designed to go to medical facilities, government services.
Yeah, understood.
So,
I mean,
um,
the argument's understood.
yeah, let me talk and see what their numbers are. So
I think you're probably right, Arn, from just observation. And it probably stems from the fact a lot of our retirement communities have their own transit. I mean, when it come day, we'd have them pull up in front of the credit union, from the different places.
Canterbury has their own fleet. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so if that wasn't available, it probably may turn those the other way. But I think your observation is probably right.
And then there was one time long ago when I sat in, you were absent that one day, and that was interesting. They were presenting a lot of data. I looked at the numbers, and at the time, I'd say maybe 4 years ago now, it was $10 per mile per passenger, or per passenger mile, however you want to look at it. And that always seemed like if you could implement an Uber ticket or something, people would be more convenienced and it would be cheaper. How you do that, I think, may be the issue.
Well, it is interesting. I've had conversations with the transit manager about, is it cheaper to just rely on Uber? And he said that there are small transit systems that have looked into, canceling fixed routes and subsidizing the Uber drives. And he's looked at it. He doesn't believe there's enough of that service available yet, although you make it available, and that it's a private enterprise direct reward thing. So
Right. The real problem for me on something like that is any system, I mean, that's really open for abuse. And I'd have to look at a whole holistic analysis to figure out if it made any sense.
we had basically a $1 a ride charge for years and years and years, kind of token because most of the people qualify for discounts because of low income to begin with. And the federal government came along and said, you're not charging enough. And we said, but we're not operating a commuter service. It's not intended to be a commuter service. And their orientation is it's all about commuters. And I groused about that. And I said, look, you raise the rates on these people who are struggling economically, and you're going to drive them away. And they're going to, ridership is going to go down. But federal rules are federal rules. And so we had to raise the rates. We have yet to regain the ridership from before we had to raise the rates. And
but that actually means then that maybe through a narrow viewport, the service wasn't worth what it cost the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Or they just don't go.
Yeah, but I mean, that's.
Yeah. It is interesting. When COVID first hit, federal government's first CARES Act included a special provision that paid for all of the transit operating costs for 2 years. And we've been collecting the sales tax all along, but there's been no problem with the operating costs. And fares never came anywhere as close. It's like 8% of the total revenue. So it's a heavily subsidized service. And it was like, so what are you doing with all that money? You're saving it and you're not going to do anything with it. I said, well, we'll use it eventually. We've got good reserves.
So just clarify what I think I heard you say earlier, this area 345 is not a normal part of the route. It's being operated off of a special grant right now.
Special grant, right?
So whenever that expires, if it ever does, then if the Lexington community wants the service, they would have an option of voting and annexing
Right.
the service into their area.
Yeah.
So that would be something they would initiate.
They would initiate. And if I remember the process, we have to approve the maps that are used to define the boundaries for the annexation. That's where our role comes in. And we can also say no.
Yeah. But they would be the ones that would be deciding if they want to charge
Yes.
themselves for it or not. We're not imposing it.
Well, that is one method. There's another method which was really kind of vague, and they said the transit board can call a conference to discuss the public need for public services. And there's a process to do that. It's only 4% of the voters can request them to hold this conference, or they can decide on their own. And according to my reading of the law, there doesn't have to be an election. It's like the transit board just annexes, and it's like, ooh, I'm a little reluctant to try to rely on that because folks need to vote on it, I think. In a
So
district like that.
just to clarify then, these sections 4 and 5, that's something that the transit is doing on their own dime?
We have a grant from the state.
Yeah, okay.
When the grant runs out, as I kind of explained, they've got plenty of operating funds.
Yeah.
We can continue, the board has to decide, is it worthwhile to continue it? But ultimately, my attitude is ultimately they need to join the district so that they're,
If
if they want it.
if they want it.
Yeah.
And we are presumably collecting all the data, like the demographics would be useful based on the
Mhm.
earlier
Maybe, and
discussion.
particularly we've got the hard part about the data is we've got the census material. There's a wealth of data on that. But with so much building going on, that changes the numbers. So I will find out what information we have both on the makeup of the ridership age-wise that you asked a little bit earlier, and I'll also talk about what kind of demographics they're looking at for.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for me to assume much. Let's say the apartments that are near the fire station, those are not going to be the cheapest things in the world. And so I'm happy to take the data we have here today.
Yeah.
If we make a mistake and we think there isn't enough ridership, it'll soon come to our attention. Much easier to build it than it is to take it down again.
And the other part is that group of apartments that is being built near Country Run is next to the BPA power lines across there. And that's the boundary between my district and yours. So most of all of Lexington is in your district. So I mean, we rely on his judgment to, you know, on whether it's the right step to go. Now, if the gentleman gets served right now temporarily, that's fine. There's probably not going to be anything done. If we have the pilot and it's producing the numbers and the riders, there may be a push. I just wanted to let you know that there's this thing that's out there that could happen. One of those two.
And what the transit people are doing for this gentleman to see if he would qualify through his disability for paratransport. So they're working on that right now.
Right.
Okay.
3/4 of a mile from wherever the orange, the route, the fixed route is, and you're eligible. Of course, 3/4 of a mile. I mean, that's most of Lexington is within 3/4 of a mile of.
You have a hand up?
We have a hand.
It was Carolyn.
Oh, hi, Carolyn. Yes, Carolyn. I asked Carolyn to give me some information about the precincts. If you have an election, it's got to be by the precincts, and she's going to share with us a little bit of what she found out about our interesting precincts.
Yeah, you had covered most of it. I just wanted to point out to the other two commissioners that the statute demands that this transportation benefit district be contiguous to city limits. So if you're specifically looking to incorporate Lexington, which is currently not contiguous to city limits, you would have to incorporate all the precincts that travel to Lexington in order for the district that you would be forming to be contiguous. So for instance, if you were traveling via West Side Highway, the precincts currently that would need to be incorporated look like Sparks, Beacon, Beulah, and Lexington. So it wouldn't just be Lexington precinct. And I'm not speaking for legal, but I'm assuming that in order for it to be contiguous, all those precincts pay an equal portion of taxes to be inside that district. So
How do you define equal portion?
well, whatever taxing district or whatever the transportation benefit district determines to be 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, whatever tax they come up with to fund this district, that's what each precinct would equally share in.
And that's the sales tax. That's the only tax revenue that they.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's equal in that the sales tax is applied in that area.
Right. And of course.
That's what I wanted to say. So
Yeah.
you're
there
not
are-
just incorporating Lexington,
Right.
to make it contiguous, you're incorporating all of those precincts that make it together to Lexington. That would be Beacon, Beulah, Sparks, and Lexington if you traveled by West Side Highway.
Right.
And then what happens if Sparks says no?
Well, interesting that you say that. Legal and I were having a conversation about that. So the statute's pretty clear in that it says that the district must follow precinct boundaries whenever applicable. So it would be like any other election in that the majority vote wins. So if, say, Beulah votes no, they only have 396 voters. Beacon, on the other hand, has 1107. If they vote yes, the majority wins. So.
Oh,
Just-
you lump all those together.
Right.
then.
Just like any other election. Yep, all those
got
precinct
it.
results, it's a majority vote.
Okay.
It's just like us in King County?
I believe King County is already countywide as a transit district.
No, I was thinking of other elections.
Oh. Oh, about Beacon Hill's influence controlling it. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate that. That helps. So like I mentioned, there are two possible routes. We could use Lexington Bridge and go down, follow the precincts to North Kelso. Or we do the Beulah Beacon Hill add-on. But hopefully they will work it out without that, so. Any other questions on that item?
Yeah, so we just think about it and then someone else has to take action and.
Right, that's not, we don't initiate it. It's got to be the people
Okay.
if we want to use it. Okay,
Except for this issue of the sidewalk, that's something we would have Public Works look at.
yes. I would think so, and I think I forwarded that request on to Mike.
He's seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he's aware of it.
Okay.
Okay, and thank you for the comment on costs, and you do point out there is an interesting challenge with wait times for taxis in town. And yes, the sidewalks can be an ADA issue. So the next item before us is another request that I received from the folks at Pacific Fiber, who own what used to be the Longbill Log Storage Pond that still exists. That was a privately created facility, and they are interested in filling it in because they do not have a use for storing logs that way anymore. The industry has completely changed. Interestingly, there is a lock system. You'll see where it says log pond down in the lower right-hand corner. That is actually a lagoon connected to the Cowlitz River and the Columbia River. But you'll see one that looks like it's completely surrounded, it's sort of rectangular shaped. And that is controlled at the north end by a couple of locks. Longbill built the locks in order to keep control of the level of the bigger log pond. And although the map shows the way it exists today, the original plans had that long, narrow canal on the left hand of the map ending in two larger ponds that serves the two main mills. That was what Longbill was. Those mills were the largest lumber mills in the world, with the capacity of each producing 1 million board feet of lumber a day. And the two mill managers used to have competitions to see who could produce more. Pretty incredible. And of course, they did cut all that lumber, and they ran out of trees again in the early 1950s. And so the whole facility was shut down. The only buildings left, if I understand correctly, the only buildings left on site from the original Weyerhaeuser or Longbill operations was the headquarters of the mill, which is sometimes referred to as the White House, which is now the headquarters for the Port of Longview. The Port of Longview has essentially all of the old Longbill mill site. There on this map, you'll also see a road called Fiber Way. And as the name would indicate, it goes in and serves the old long fiber mill, which is now called West Rock. And there is a kind of a white road that takes off from Fiber Way, and then there's a couple of right angles. And that first right angle with the longest road is, you'll recall, that's where the new box plant is being built.
Hmm.
Okay, and then the other paper mills fulfilled the rest of the that triangle. So at any rate, Pacific Fiber would like us to support their offer to the Corps of Engineers to use that log storage pond, the old log storage pond, for dredge spoils from both the Columbia River and the Cowlitz, if they choose to dredge in that area. And I offered to draft a letter, and I'm presenting that to you to see if you have any questions or concerns about us sending that to the Corps in support of Pacific Fiber's request. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out is, you'll notice where it says Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. That's a little bit of a misnomer. That is the Ports Railroad. And if you'll notice, it goes across the dike or the canals. And on the right-hand side of the map, you'll see a road that's a kind of a loop. That's the top of the Tenant Way landfill. So that railroad is right at the north edge, and it goes into what is referred to as Longview switching, which is the one adjacent to Tenant Way. And that's the Burlington Northern and Union Pacific facility. So the Ports Railroad will come off of that. It's going to be expanding to 8 tracks eventually. Their whole project is an 8-track route. And they are acquiring, I think we signed off on the purchase agreement with them for a little sliver around the old Tenant Way site.
Yeah, how long,
And that's been a while ago, because these projects take forever.
so that has been completed, the sale?
I think so, but I don't remember signing anything. to that
Yeah, I don't
intent, so-
remember seeing the.
So it's all,
file.
I think we've accepted the, we've negotiated, settled on a price, I believe.
Yeah.
But they had some environmental issues to make sure they could overcome, so.
Do you remember the amount of land that was? It was a sliver, yeah, but it amounted to a few acres, I thought. Maybe half a
I am
dozen?
thinking 6 acres in that strip.
Yeah, that's. the
Right
number I
around there,
remember. Okay.
so, yeah, so. This certainly is going to be something that will be very, very helpful as Longview Fiber continues to expand and kind of recover from the shutdown of Long Bell. Long story.
Well, I can see some of the benefits for it. My questions are always, I don't know how deep this pond is, and I don't know where the water goes that won't be there anymore. Does it just out to the river? I mean, I always concerned if you have a place that's storing water and then you fill it up, it's got to go somewhere, and I
Right.
don't want it to affect other properties. If it's reasonable to assume that it would just fall into capacity into the Columbia or Cowlitz, I can,
Right.
It will do that. I mean, that would be where the water would be displaced to.
But in terms of Columbia or the Cowlitz, it's a drop.
yeah. And it looks like it should do that. I just trying to make sure I understand that
Yeah.
correctly. But
So the water level right now is higher than the Columbia River. That's the locks are keeping it higher, but and some of it has been filled in.
once it's filled, then really the locks don't.
Yeah.
I'm
probably
wondering,
take
they
out the
probably don't
locks.
even serve a
There's no-
purpose anymore.
No necessity of that. And I'm
Yeah,
so again, it's unusual that you have a huge lake like this in a floodplain that's private.
Well,
Yeah.
I've
And
looked,
that's the other interesting thing. Yeah.
I've looked at the letter. I think it's, I'm happy with it. It's good to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I'm sure working with the Army Corps of engineers, they got them going through a lot of stuff. But
That's true. That's true.
yeah, out of curiosity, so how do we get the dredge spoil? How do we, the proverbial we, get the dredge spoils into the pond?
So that would be something that the Corps would have to figure out, you know.
Yeah,
I know the last time I drove south on I-5, I noticed that they're dredging in the river and they've
Yep.
got these pontoons on which the dredge pipe
yeah,
moves. And so they've got some flexibility to move the dredge spoils around. As long as you've got water to move
yeah.
the sediment will move, as we certainly know about Mount St. Helens. So most likely, it would probably be through that small canal. That's might be where it's closest to the Columbia, or it may have to come up through the past the West Rock docks through the canal. That would be the other. And then the other thing would be coming underneath the bridge or underneath the railroad track somehow off of the Cowlitz. And what is kind of interesting is at the very top of the map. Well, I think it's interesting. It says Industrial Way. Historically, that was called California Way. And for those who grew up in the 50s and 60s, that was the route to get to the bridge to go to Portland. And right where the railroad tracks is the top of a tunnel that we used to drive through in order to get out to the bridge over to Portland. And the top of that tunnel still exists, which means that could possibly be a route you could tie into because that concrete structure is still there, which would be how you get underneath all those railroad tracks under the switching company.
Yeah.
I would think. That
Well,
was it was a 2-lane tunnel with the concrete wall between the 2 lanes. It would fill up with water every rainstorm. And teenagers would play chicken going down the wrong direction, as teens want to do. Pretty interesting little tunnel.
but I too read through the letter and I don't have any concerns with it. I'm making an assumption here that the landowners around Pacific Fiber, do they own all the property? They're okay with it too. I mean, I don't want to say now get a call saying, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, Pacific Fiber
Probably owns all that around
owns
there.
all that,
Yeah.
most of the land. I mean, there are businesses along that stretch of Industrial Way on the south side that they don't own, but their stormwater, I'm sure, is focused towards the street, because that's where the storm drains would be.
I'm okay with the letter.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Oh, wait, let me see what's, no, those are for the other issue.
Let me take you back to the transportation. We do have a Q&A comment there.
Right.
I'm not sure what to make out of it, but
I think the anonymous attender was pointing out the advantages of having the transit system as an alternative. Even though it's
Right.
heavily subsidized, the alternatives are much more expensive and timely.
But
Yeah.
I look at that as a bit odd because Kelso Post Office, that's basically where we are right now. And going to Kaiser is, it's certainly not, what, 2 miles?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I would assume 40 to 50 is from their experience. I think their point is that it's a quicker service to take the bus, even though every bus route is an hour long.
Okay.
Right, any other?
Oh, actually, he may be commenting on that there are no cabs. If you want to wait over hours to obtain a cab.
Yeah.
You have to wait for hours to obtain a bus.
No, only an hour.
Only an hour?
during the operations. They're all hour-long routes. There's one express route that goes back and forth between
Yeah.
Longview, shorter distance, but they're all calculated at an hour rate for the most part. All right, you're okay with the letter too?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
on
Thank you.
that. And the Lexington thing is at this point, just information only. Is there anything else to be brought to our attention?
Though they are trying to help the one gentleman.
Yes,
Yeah.
You're,
okay.
you're what?
they are trying to help the one guy that made the
Oh, yeah.
inquiry. All right. Seeing no hands raised and no other comments. We would.
We could point out that on the average, we're staying within bounds. We're going to end early today, making up for being late last week.
Yep, that's true. All right. All right, we will see you again tomorrow morning. Meeting starts at 9 o'clock. Today's meeting's adjourned. Thank you.